Up to this point, of all the things that the British Parliament has subjected the American colonists to, the Stamp Act of 1765 will be the absolute worst. And the key with this particular act is that this probably affected more colonists than the other acts had affected. Okay, this is going to affect a lot more people. This particular act. So really, in the midst of colonial agitation over the passage of these previous acts we've talked about, Parliament then adopts the Stamp Act of 1765, which was a direct tax, which meant the money would go directly back to who, is he? And specifically the British Parliament, because they're passing the law. So the colonists see no benefit to them, right? This money is not going to benefit the colonies in any way, shape, or form. This money is going to go back to Parliament. Now, basically what the Stamp Act did is it levied taxes on paper licenses of all kind. Paper licenses of all kind. And how did they tell whether you paid the tax or not, Andy? Thus the name of Stamp Act. What'd they do to show that you paid the tax? Thus the name Stamp Act. They put a stamp on that license to show that you paid the tax. If it didn't have a stamp on it, then you were not paying the tax on it. So I'll give you some examples of things that they levied taxes on paper licenses. Maybe you can give me, Caleb, what's an example of a paper license maybe today?
Like sending an envelope through the mail?
Maybe. No, that wouldn't be a license, but that's a good guess. What might be an example of a paper license? Okay, pretty close. Like a graduation diploma or license from high school. A college diploma or license. They had both high school and college diplomas back in those days. I don't think they had cosmetology quite yet. But that's a good point. They put taxes on college diplomas. So if you got a college diploma and you got your license, I have a teaching license that tells me that I'm capable of teaching you in AP US history, I would have to pay taxes on that, and they would put a stamp on that saying I did. Okay? That's very good. That's not usually the first one they get. What else? I'll give you a hint. Some paper licenses often are called legal documents. So what type of legal documents back in 1765 would they have? They made tax. Marriage license. Very good. That would be an example of a legal document that would be taxed. Regan, do you have any other idea what are other legal documents?
Maybe like the
Birth certificate? That would be a legal document. Okay. How about I own a house? What do I have that says I own that house? I have a deed. So deeds would be taxed. Just like if you're a farmer and you have land, you have a deed that shows that you own that land. So that's a license. That is something that would be taxed. College diplomas. You know what else got taxed? I would have got taxed today. So what I did is today I talked with the Northern Wyoming Daily News, and I put an advertisement in the paper Saturday thanking all of the people that sponsored golf holes for the tournament this past weekend. And I have to pay for that ad. I also would have to pay in the college this time tax on that advertisement. So any advertisement. So if you stuck in those days, you could either put an advertisement in the paper because they did have papers in those days, or you could maybe stick a billboard up on a post saying, "Hey, I have a garage sale today." You would have to put that would be tax. You'd have to pay tax on it. Okay. Newspapers were taxed. So newspaper editors that ran newspapers back in the day, they had to pay taxes on their newspapers. Mainly it was legal documents, but they also taxed newspapers and advertisements and college diplomas. Anybody going camping this weekend during the Labor Day weekend? Okay, Ms. Zimmerman, what might you do with your family at night if you decide you're not going to? You might do it around the fire, but most people get around the fire at night. Well, my wife and I close our night in the mountains by playing some sort of a game. What do we play? We sit down and play cards. Okay. And they put taxes on cards, playing cards, which was really kind of a big event back in that day. A lot of people were into playing cards. They didn't have Monopoly games and those types of things, or video games back in 1765, so people played cards a lot. And so those cards were taxed as well. So those are some examples of things that were taxed. Now, as I mentioned, all those licenses or cards or diplomas had to bear a stamp showing the tax had been paid. Now, what do you think the colonists think of Prime Minister George Grenville this time? They don't like him, right? They think he's kind of a dictator type, whatever. But you know, you got to kind of give this guy a little bit of a break. Because here's a couple things to think about. First of all, when they gave him this job, they gave him the job to take care of the war debt, right? And so that's his job. He's got to do it. But on the other hand, before he put in the stamp tax, he actually said to the colonists in 1764, I'll give you a year to come up with an alternative way to get taxed. You want representation? You get together and you give me a better way to tax you than the way we're taxing you, and I'll listen to it. Unfortunately, they didn't respond. And so he said, well, I gave you a chance to come up with your own way to be taxed, and he didn't take it, so that's why he put the stamp tax on these documents. So you got to give him a little credit that he at least tried, right, to have them come up with an alternative, and they did not. So in a way, you've got to kind of give him a break, okay? Well, again, the colonists continue to complain, and the British government continues to justify why they should be able to tax them. Now, think about this. We've talked about some of these, but if you're a citizen of Great Britain, which they are the colonists not citizens of Great Britain, if the people in Great Britain are paying taxes, why would you think you wouldn't have to pay taxes? That was an argument that the British Parliament had. Does that make sense? It kind of makes sense, right? They said that. Now, here's another thing that's kind of weird. We told you, did everybody have, I didn't tell you, this is the other class. Did everybody have a chance to vote in the first presidential election? Do you think it was Washington? Did every single citizen vote in that election? No. Why not? Who voted in the first, who elected Washington? Congress, through something we know as the Electoral College, the electoral vote. I'll give you a little history that we're going to be talking about. When we were looking for a president and vice president back in 1789 after this revolution ended, members of Congress didn't think that the common or average person should be able to vote for president because they didn't know who the candidates were, right? Who knew the candidates best? Congress. And so they made the rule that they would use the Electoral College, that the congressmen, the House of Representatives, and the Senate would vote for president. And so, and back in the day, nobody went to the polls. Who voted for president and vice president for several elections? Congress. The common person had no vote at all. Matter of fact, to tell you the truth, technically, and I think I told you this, if every single person in Wyoming votes for Donald Trump in this last election, John Barrasso, as a U.S. Senator or an elector, he could vote for Hillary Clinton if he wanted to. That's his choice. They never do that, but that he could if he wanted. And that's the argument among the Electoral College, is that 2 million more people in this last election voted for Hillary Clinton, yet she's not the President of the United States because the electors, based on population in states where so many electoral votes, Wyoming were 3 because we have 2 senators and a representative, they do that so that the big states don't control the election through popular vote. So there's a lot of controversy over that. Did you hear a lot about that in the news? Gee whiz, you know, Hillary Clinton wins by 2 million votes and she's not the president. Well, that's a controversy. But way back in time, not everybody got a vote. So the second point I'm making with Grenville is he said, well, I don't understand why you guys think you get a vote on all these taxes. People back in England don't all vote. I mean, everybody in England didn't have the right to vote at that time, so why would the colonists think that they all had the right to vote on something? Does that make sense? So that was another justification they made on this Stamp Act, right? So that was kind of the point I want to make when I put the Stamp Act up. Well, that takes us to our next subtopic, which is pretty explanatory: opposition to the Stamp Act. There was violent opposition to this Stamp Act. People were mad in the colonies. Now, prior to this, did the colonists bond together and try to do anything about protesting these taxes? Or did they just kind of complain? They just complained, didn't they? Well, now, when you get this Stamp Act up, you're going to have groups to get together. And I'll give you 2 examples of that. The first example is, in 9 of the 13 colonies, 9 of the 13, they sent a delegate to New York City to get together to decide what they were going to do to protest these taxes, this taxation without representation. Unfortunately, not all 13 colonies participated, but 9 did. And if they sent a delegate, it would be like if you guys are upset about the way I'm treating you in AP US history, instead of all running down to Mr. Sanford's office and complaining about me, you probably would get farther if you sent a delegate, someone that you felt was knowledgeable and would, would give him your views. You'd send that delegate down there, wouldn't you, to protest? Not all of them. It works better if you do it that way. Well, that's what they did. So 9 of the 13 colonies sent a delegate to New York City, and they're all going to meet in New York City to try to decide how they're going to protest this Stamp Act. And what was the name of that meeting, Bailey, that these people all got together? Gave it a name. It's on your ID sheet. What was it called? What's that? No, before that. Stamp Act Congress. Very good. So these 9 delegates became known in American history as the Stamp Act Congress. And these delegates went to New York City and got together from these colonies and decided what they were going to do concerning protests of the Stamp Act Congress. Well, it's kind of weird because you know the first thing they did? They asserted their loyalty to the king. They asserted their loyalty to the king. So what they say publicly? We will be loyal to the king. Okay? They also stated, this is another thing they stated, is they stated that they would promise all due subordination to Parliament. So they get there and right away they make it clear among the 9 of them that all 9 colonies represented will assert their loyalty to the king, which means they will stay loyal to the king, and all of those colonies promise all due subordination to Parliament. All due subordination. Now, Daniel, what is it if I say, Daniel, you're being insubordinate? What's that mean?
Not listening, I guess, or working.
Or not, mainly not so much not listening, but not doing what you're told. So if you're subordinate, if Daniel's subordinate, he's doing what he's told. If he's insubordinate, he gets sent to the office and Mr. Gunderson disciplines him and he puts on the discipline form, Daniel was insubordinate towards Mr. Doer today. That means you didn't do what I asked you to do. Well, if they're saying that they are going to promise all due subordination, they're saying we are going to do whatever Parliament says. So they assert their loyalty to the king, and then they tell Parliament, yeah, we're loyal British servants, we're going to do what you tell us to do. However, we believe that passing taxes upon us, in which we have no representation, is illegal, and we will not pay. That's what they're saying. Even though they're saying they're going to be loyal and they're going to be subordinate, they're protesting by saying, we don't believe that taxation without representation is legal. And so therefore we are going to protest paying these taxes. That makes sense? So they're not being total jerks, are they? They're saying, hey, we understand we're British citizens, we're going to be loyal to the king, we're going to be subordinate to Parliament, but we don't believe that it's legal to tax us without representation. So they made their point, right? Is England going to care about that? Really? Are they just going to stop taxing them because they don't like it? They think it's illegal? No, they're going to have to do something to get England's attention. And what they did is the most key point, and I want you to really underline this or whatever, make sure you highlight it, is these delegates talked the colonial merchants into signing non-importation agreements, which is on your review or ID sheet, and very important you know what these are. We'll explain it to you. So, the big thing they did at the Stamp Act Congress is they talked all the colonial merchants into signing non-importation agreements. And you're going, what the? Daniel's back there, his head's just about to explode. What is that? I'm going to tell you. Non-importation agreements. Now we'll figure it out on your own, I'll bet. But that was the big one. So, Maddie, what do you think non-importation means? What a wonderful answer. What these British merchants are saying is, we will no longer buy from or import any goods from Britain. We're going to cut them off. We're going to import from France and Spain and the Netherlands, even though they're taxing us. Remember they're taxing them on that? Remember the tax that came up that they had to pay tax? They're going to cut off Britain, and they're going to deal with France, the Netherlands, Spain, and buy things from local American farmers and craftsmen, and we're going to not trade any more with Great Britain. We're not going to buy anything from them, and we're not going to import anything from them. So basically, in just a few months after they meet, trade between Great Britain and the American colony just comes to a standstill. Just comes to a complete standstill. Keep that in mind for later. So that's one way American colonists protested this Stamp Act, is by getting delegates together in the Stamp Act Congress, making a couple of statements, and then getting these merchants to sign these non-importation agreements in which they would not purchase from the British at all. It's going to cost them more to do that? The British, sure it is, the merchants, but they're going to try to make a point. Well, average Americans wanted to get in the game. They wanted to protest a little bit. So American colonists started organizing groups and called themselves the Sons of Liberty. So individual American colonists wanted to get together and protest. So they organized groups called the Sons of Liberty. They were a little more radical in their viewpoints. And I'm going to give you five examples of what they did to protest the Stamp Act. Okay? So these groups of individuals get together, just like all you guys are sick of taxation. So here's Group A of the Sons of Liberty. There are lots of different groups. It's a big organization, but many groups in different areas. So you guys get together, and you're going to protest the Stamp Act. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to riot in large towns. Because you're going to get some publicity from that. Are people going to notice that? That you're mad, you're protesting? Yeah, you're going to riot in large towns. So the Sons of Liberty got together and they rioted in large towns to make a scene. Okay? You didn't want to be a stamp tax collector at this time because they went and destroyed the offices of the stamp tax collectors and took the stamps that they didn't destroy. So that's the second thing they did. The first thing they did is they rioted in large towns. The second thing they did is they destroyed the offices of stamp tax collectors, and they burnt up their offices, but they did steal some of the stamps. Which leads us to number 3. What did they do? Number 3 then, after they broke into the tax collectors' offices and destroyed them, and destroyed some of the stamps and took the other stamps, Mackenzie, what do you think they did with those stamps they took? What? Well, kind of, they kept them, you're right, but to be protesting, what did they do?
They used them.
They didn't use them, they abused them. They burned them in the streets in protest. So they took these stamps that they had stolen, so to speak, from these tax collectors, the stamps that they put on all these documents, right? And they burnt them in the streets to show their protest for the tax. That was the third thing they did. They burned stamps in the streets. Yep. 2, they destroyed the offices of stamp tax collectors. So if somebody's got to collect this tax and put that stamp on that document, right? Well, they had offices. Well, they went into the offices and destroyed their offices, destroyed the stamps, but they took some of the stamps. And number 3, in protest, they took those stamps they took, so to speak, and they lit them afire in the street so people could see. Okay? 4th thing they did was there royal officials living in the colonies, people from Great Britain running the colonies, living, sure there were. What they did is they destroyed and burnt the houses of royal officials. They destroyed houses of royal officials. So it'd be like going to Mr. Sanford's because you don't like what he's doing and destroying his house, because he would be an administrative official that's making the rules you don't like, right? So they destroyed and burnt houses of royal officials. We okay on this? So Jordy, do you think there might have been people in the colonies that maybe didn't approve of the actions of the Sons of Liberty, that sympathized with Great Britain that were loyal to Great Britain more than they should have been? Yeah. Now what do you think the Sons of Liberty did to them, Luke?
They burned their houses.
No? Good guess. What, Luke? What'd they do to these people? Nope. They might have wanted to be killed. What'd they do?
Did they make almost everyone in America look like they were also radicals? To England?
No, that's a good guess. No, they did something specific to these people that were sympathetic to Great Britain. You wouldn't like it. Didn't kill them. That'd be too quick and easy. What they do to them? You've heard of it, I know. No? What? What was that? What'd you say? Quartered them?
Why not?
You're way too violent here, folks. Adriana, what'd they do? You would hate this if I did this to you. You wouldn't die from it, but you'd be miserable a while. You wouldn't hurt very much. I mean, you wouldn't be injured from it.
I don't know. Beat them up.
They were mean.
They were mean, but what'd they do to be mean? Marked them, kind of.
Did they make them work?
No? Yeah, I know you've heard of it. What'd you say, Kate? Don't be bashful. I'm knocking that out of you. You don't be bashful. What do you think? What'd they do to him? What were you gonna say?
Hard work, like,
Woo! She sits there thinking she knows nothing and she knows everything. They tarred and then feathered them. Very good, Kate Wasson. Let's have a hand for Kate. She's sitting there going, I think this is a dumb answer. I'm not going to say it. It'll look idiotic. You are right. You are the MVP of the day so far. They poured hot tar on them and feathered them. My God, you know how brutal. Would that make you incredibly uncomfortable?